Welcome back to Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Well, hello and welcome to this week's Sunday Conversation here on Big Country Politics. I'm Manny Diaz. This week our special guest is Dr. Paul Fabrizio. He is professor of political science at McMurray University. Dr. Paul Fabrizio, thank you so much for joining us. It's been too long since you've been on this program.
Well, I'm glad to be here again. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, you and Dr. Coates of Abilene Christian certainly gave Abilene and the Big Country something to talk about following the candidate forum between Liz Case and Stan Lambert. So, yeah, I mean, it was like watching Charles Barkley and Kenny the Jet Smith, talking about, something that you guys are very passionate about, certainly the political game there.
Yeah, you've got to get us both on this show at the same time in the future. That'll be fun.
Yes,
yeah,
indeed.
Neil is a great guy.
I think we opened up Pandora's box on that.
You did.
Because we're going to have you both on it sometime.
Yes.
So, all right, so we have a number of things to talk about. Probably one of the biggest, we'll get to that District 71 race here in a bit, but certainly, let's start things off with this sheriff's race with Ricky Bishop, Elias Carrasquillo, and Shea Bailey. Ricky Bishop won this thing handily, 77%. He wins another term. It feels like he's been in office for ages. Tell me what that means for him to earn yet another term and pretty much earn the trust of the people once more.
Well, what it means is that he can go forward into this next term confident that the voters here support him. And that's really helpful when he gets into negotiations with the county commissioners over budgets, that sort of stuff. If there's any issues that come up, everybody's going to look at him and go, this man has won this job 3 times now. And he beat back opposition from people who are associated with the sheriff's department to get this last round, to win this last round. So he goes in with I would argue, an enhanced position of respect, security, as he goes forward in his job.
That's interesting there. Another race on Super Tuesday was what we saw from the County Commissioners Precinct 1. And Randy Williams won this thing handily, I believe by 84%. We saw in District 19, the congressional race with Jody Arrington winning very handily there. And these are the incumbents here.
Yes.
And I think you and we were kind of trying to put things together, although those separate races, two completely different titles there, but it's the incumbents that really won in this thing.
Yeah, in any election where there's a challenger and an incumbent, usually the incumbent wins. And what we saw here all the way through the District 71, the congressional race, the sheriff's race, is that the incumbent won, and the incumbent mostly won handily. And so County Commissioner Randy Williams, Jody Arrington, Sheriff Ricky Bishop, all of them had a good name recognition in the community. And then with that name recognition, were able to beat back the challengers who confronted them. And so it really helps to be the incumbent. It really, really does, because people know you. When you go and ask for money to raise for advertising, people know your record. They're familiar with you. And so the challengers are usually people who aren't known. So unless the incumbent is caught in some scandal, then usually the challenger loses, the incumbent wins.
It's interesting you bring that up, the incumbent. But and we saw a challenger that really almost kind of crept up and got one. It was in the race against Stan Lambert, with Stan Lambert and Liz Case. From your perspective, what would it take for a challenger to truly rise up and oust one of these type of incumbents that's been so, I guess, ingrained in communities like Abilene and the Big Country?
Well, we can use Sheriff Ricky Bishop as an example. He challenged the incumbent, Les Bruce, 2 elections ago, and he won. And there were questions about what was going on in the sheriff's department at that time. I think there was a couple of jail escapes. And so the people were looking and going, is this right? And then when you have a deputy challenge the sheriff, you go, wait, maybe there's something going on here. Maybe this guy isn't the right person for the job. So Ricky Bishop was able to do that and say, he's not the right person. We need a different way to look at it. Ricky Bishop really talked about salaries, and we needed to raise salaries, and he said I'll have a better relationship with the county commissioners who provide the money. And so that was enough to get him over. So in this race, for the sheriff's race, I was looking at it going, okay, well, you have people who are familiar with the sheriff's department who are challenging Ricky Bishop. Could Ricky Bishop be experiencing the same thing that took place 2 elections ago? Is he in fact vulnerable? And what I thought was interesting about the sheriff's race is that there was a lot of attention focused early on the sheriff's race. There was these accusations that were brought up, and they raised questions about how Bishop is managing the department. There were questions even about pay and retention. And so all those harken back to a couple races ago for the sheriff's department. But then all those accusations stopped, and the race just sort of disappeared from the public's eye. And it was overtaken by the state representative's race. And that just overwhelmed anything. So if any of those challengers had a chance against Ricky Bishop, it just disappeared with the state representative's race.
Wow.
So, I mean, in the end, voters, I mean, how do I want to say this? A lot of voters don't pay that much attention to what is going on. So you need something that's going to get their attention. And there wasn't any obvious scandal. There wasn't any, prisoner escapes from the jail. So there was nothing to grab onto. Where the state representative's race,
there was plenty.
Holy
my
mackerel,
gosh.
yeah.
Yes.
There was so much to pay attention to.
Well, speaking of that, we're going to take a quick commercial break, but when we return, we're going to talk with Dr. Paul Fabrizio about that District 71 race and what that's going to mean for Abilene, the Big Country, and the state of Texas moving forward. That and more right here on Big Country Politics.
Welcome back to Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Well, welcome back to our Sunday conversation here on Big Country Politics. Our special guest this week is Dr. Paul Fabrizio. He's professor of political science at McMurray University. Dr. Fabrizio, from the sales perspective, our sales department loved the District 71 race for state rep because just the ad dollars that were being spent. I believe it was 10-1 that what we looked at in favor of Liz Case and the support that she received there. Tell me, I know you and Dr. Coates touched on this on our candidate forum night, but to see that type of election where these candidates were just going at each other's throats, I mean, it looked like a true blood sport between each other. Tell me about that. I assume unprecedented at this point.
Yes, very much unprecedented. Here in Taylor County, I can't recall another race that was like that. The amount of money that was spent, the endorsements, I mean, a presidential endorsement. Donald Trump endorsed the challenger, Liz Case. When was the last time a presidential candidate stepped in to any local race here? It's never happened before. So that was all really, really amazing. But I think what we have to talk about is we have to get to the core of what's going on. And the core of it is that the Republican Party is, as the majority party in the state, is now purging itself as it defines itself. So it's trying to define itself in a certain way. Ken Paxton, Greg Abbott, Ted Cruz, Donald Trump want to define the party sort of as an insurgent kind of thing. And there's the old business establishment Republican Party. And what's taking place is that the insurgents went after the business establishment, called them rhinos, say Republican only in name. So they're narrowing down the definition of what a Republican is as they get more and more power. We are seeing the Republican Party trying to become, in a certain sense, really strictly defined under the leadership of Donald Trump, with no one else really allowed to be a politician in that mix.
Wow, that's an interesting take there. Keeping this race in mind, I think it's safe to say that school vouchers was a major part of this District 71 House race, primarily because of Stan Lambert's choice not to vote with school choice in favor of Greg Abbott there. Not too many incumbents really kind of survived that thing. I think it was just here locally.
There was two.
Yeah, I mean,
there was Stan Lambert and Drew Darby down in San Angelo.
Indeed, and both won by very, very slim margins there.
Right.
What does this mean for school vouchers moving forward? I mean, it seems like it's almost like it's not a matter of if, but when, now that school vouchers will certainly be passed in Texas.
Yeah, I think the governor has demonstrated his power. The governor's spending, we don't know officially how much money, but the government, by spending this money and picking candidates and going after those who did not support school vouchers, the government is saying, hey, you're going to do it my way. If after the runoff, which will be the end of May, if the speaker is kicked out, and the speaker now is in a runoff, if he is kicked out, the new speaker, whoever he is simply going to be a supplicant to the governor. The governor is going to dominate. And so the people who are elected owe their existence to the governor. The governor is going to call those chips in and say, hey, I got you in this office. You are going to support me.
For the folks out here in rural West Texas, or just West Texas in general, or perhaps were these areas of Texas where these incumbents did not survive, that voted against Greg Abbott's school choice, what do you think that that's somewhat of a black eye on Governor Abbott? You know, or what do you think his support is going to be like? Do you think people will remember these particular elections?
People will remember the elections. The governor took a political risk. We got to remember the Republican Party is really centered in rural areas. You go to the big cities, the Republican Party is really not very important. You go to the rural areas, the Republican Party is incredibly important. So the governor, by what he did, by going and challenging the incumbents all through the state and saying, hey, you supported local interests, you're not supporting statewide interests, the governor is really challenging and taking a risk here. He's saying, we need to nationalize this. We need to pay attention to what's important for all of Texas, not what's important for just rural Texas. So he won in a great many of those races. So the governor has got voter support for him nationalizing this election and saying local interests are less important. That's a big deal, but is there going to be a consequence for that where rural areas are going to lose influence? If Liz Case had won, representing Abilene would be a woman who only moved here recently. You know, whenever she got here, whether it was 4 years ago or whenever, she is not tied to this as Stan Lambert was. So would she really represent rural Texas, or would she instead represent Greg Abbott? And that's really the whole thing right here.
Yeah.
That's what this is about.
Indeed, indeed. Well, Dr. Paul Fabrizio, certainly appreciate your time as always. Your thoughts are just, it's amazing just to interact with you on this, because I think you just tell it like it is, you know, and that's what's good to see with folks in your line of work.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
All right.
It's good to be here.
Well, for Dr. Paul Fabrizio, Professor of Political Science at McMurray University, I am Manny Diaz. This has been another Sunday Conversation right here on KTAB. We'll see you next time. God bless.